Hello everyone, and welcome back to This Week in the Clinic. So glad to have you back. We've got an awesome show in store for you this week. We're going to be talking all about anxiety. We're going to be talking about the Anxiety Toolkit. We're going to give you a really nice set of things that you can walk away with to help yourself or maybe others who may be suffering from anxiety. And you know, it's one of those things that is so pervasive and so many people are experiencing this, yet no one really talks about it. It's such a taboo topic. And I actually find that over the whole field of mental health. Mental health is rarely discussed. You know, you might say to someone or be hanging out with a friend or something and say, hey, you know, I have a headache today, or you know, I smashed my knee. But rarely does someone say, you know, I really feel down. Right? I'm experiencing depression, I'm experiencing anxiety, and therefore people don't start that conversation. So today, in This Week in the Clinic, I'm hoping to crack open that conversation a little bit. Love to hear your feedback, and if you have any questions as we move along here, I'm happy to answer them and address those. And I mean, just the fact that you're tuning in alone is great in terms of bringing more awareness to mental health as a whole. So I'm just going to check in here. Just get my computer here ready online so I can see your comments come in, and we can deal with those as they come along. And you know, again, if you're joining me on your phone, feel free to like this, give it the old thumbs up if you like where we're going with this, just so I know you're joining me. And I already see a couple coming in. Thank you so much. And we'll just move right along here. So we've got a pretty awesome itinerary. But before I go there, I just want to introduce myself if you're joining me for your first time. I'm Josh Gitalis. I'm a clinical nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, and I run my clinic here in Toronto. I see people one-on-one in person. I also work with people worldwide through Skype and phone. And I also have a number of courses. I offer a full functional nutrition certification program, and you can always check out more information on that at functionalnutrition.ca. And I spend the other part of my time running these courses. The next course I actually have in line is all about mental health and neurology. So if you want to check that out, you can just click the link in the description here for this Facebook live stream. So I see a couple people are chiming in here. Kush says, thanks. This is such an important topic these days. It totally is. And we're going to dive deep into why it is so important and why I'm talking about it today. And Marianne says, looking forward to this. And I am too. So let's get right into our discussion all about anxiety. So we're going to talk about what is anxiety. We're going to, I got a little bit of an itinerary here. We're going to talk about the symptoms of anxiety, and we've all experienced anxiety before, probably daily. We just don't really give it a name or maybe know what's happening to us. We're going to talk about why so many people experience this thing called anxiety. We're going to talk about the two lesser known causes of anxiety. You know, we know that there's many causes, and we know that a car almost hitting us on the side of the road is a cause of anxiety, but there's actually a couple reasons why people can get anxiety. And I see this in the clinic weekly, if not daily, right? And this is one of the things that I'm bringing from the clinic to you this week. And that's the point of the show, This Week in the Clinic, is to take what I learned working with people in a clinical setting, the little lessons and things that we can learn, that I learned, and bringing those to you so that you can apply them to your life to live a better and healthier life. Okay. Then we're going to get into the two pillars of mental health, and we're finally going to offer you 5 things that you can do, a little toolkit to really help with anxiety. And you don't necessarily have to wait till you have anxiety. You don't necessarily have to have anxiety as an issue for you to do these things. They're helpful no matter what, but they can be super powerful for those who might be dealing with anxiety. So I already have a couple quick questions, just going to address those quickly. If I were to take the functional nutrition program, will I be able to request different blood work? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. I know you're referring to my functional nutrition certification program, but in terms of blood work, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. So just contact our office, info@joshgitalis.com. We'd be happy to help you out with that, or send me a private message after this live cast. Comment from Laura. Thought and over, prepared, but just read an article on anxiety and I ticked many boxes. Need tools to calm my thoughts. I think we all do. Will tonight's information apply to children as well? Absolutely, it applies to children. And people ask me about children all the time. And you know, children are just little adults, right? They have all the same bits and pieces. So, you know, we just have to modify dosages sometimes or how we do things, but they have the same nervous system. You know, their nervous system works the exact same way. It's developing maybe a lot quicker. So yeah, it would definitely apply to children. And let's get right into some of these things so we can get into the juice. So first of all, symptoms of anxiety. And it's, I think, something that we've all experienced, right? It's sweating, it's heart palpitations, it's chest pain sometimes, it's fatigue, it's headaches, shortness of breath, muscle tension. You know, it's these feelings that kind of get us on edge and get us ready to run or to fight. And that's the whole point of anxiety, right? So the anxious reaction that we get is based on a system that's been developed and put in place from thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago when we were roaming around with saber-toothed tigers. And this system helped us because we're still here today, right? And what's the point of the system? The fight or flight system. We stimulate those adrenal glands as soon as we see a threat. And what does it do? It activates the sympathetic nervous system, which causes our pupils to dilate so we can see better and think better. It causes increased blood flow to the brain, increased blood flow to the extremities, the arms and the legs, so we can run or fight. And it increases our heart rate, it increases our blood pressure, it increases clotting factors in the bloodstream, so in case we're hurt or our skin gets damaged, we don't bleed out and die from that. So it gets us ready for that. And it's a very important critical response for survival in the short term. When it becomes a problem is when this response persists over the long term and becomes a chronic response. So acute response, good. Chronic response, not so good. And then we can run into problems. So this is what we're based on. It's the fight or flight response, and it's what turns on anytime we see a threat. Now, we don't typically get what we call anxiety from one thing. I don't know if any of you notice this, but you know, if there's one thing in your life that's stressing you out, it's usually not a deal breaker, unless maybe sometimes it's a really big thing. But usually if it's a really big thing, it affects a lot of other little things. It's many things that usually play into that anxiety response, right? And they build up, and then you feel overwhelmed and you experience anxiety, and some people even experience panic attacks. So this is something that we want to control. And this is where I like to talk about the two pillars of mental health, which actually I'll get to in a moment. But I first want to answer the question as to why so many people experience it. Why are so many people tuning in right now? Why are many people going to watch this video? Why do people even care about anxiety, and why is it becoming such a problem? And I have to say that the cards are stacked against us. There are so many opportunities for that fight or flight nervous system to be stimulated. And I'll give you some examples. Traffic, right? Driving in a car, not really natural. I don't think we were doing that, 2 million years ago. Billboards, trying to stimulate your nervous system. Violence, whether it's on TV, on a computer, on a TV show, in a movie, in something you read. Money issues can stimulate it. Arguments with people can stimulate it, can get you riled up, so relationships are very important. Then we can have actually a whole slew of biochemical threats to our body that can create anxiety. We can have a reaction to food. We can have all sorts of things happening. Jack has written, traveling in airports. Yeah, again, traveling across the world isn't something that's natural to our body and can really stimulate the nervous system for various reasons, right? There's alarms, there's noises, there's schedules to keep to, there's chemicals you're exposed to, there's other people, there's turbulence, that scares the bejesus out of a lot of people. There's, a whole bunch of other threats that we're exposed to when we travel. So people who travel a lot, there's also going across time zones, which is highly unnatural. And this can all stress the nervous system, right, and cause anxiety. And it's usually when a lot of these things build up that it becomes a problem. So when people come in to see me, when my clients come in to see me and they say they have anxiety, I'm not surprised, because we are set up to have these feelings. I mean, the world is set up against us. You go onto Netflix, or you go onto the TV, or you flip through the channels, and what do you see? Violence everywhere, right? Like me and my wife, we try to watch, if we're going to watch a show without any violence. No one's beating each other, no one's punching each other, no one's shooting at each other. We want our nervous system to calm down. We usually use it to help relax, and that's what helps to get us out of fight or flight mode, watching more relaxing shows, comedies and dramas and rom-coms, I'm afraid I'm admitting, to really get the cortisol flowing out of the body. So we have all these stressors, and no one's really ever taught us back in the day how to actually deal with stress. Okay? No one's really taught us the skills. Most of the time, that was either our parents' job or our school's job, and they don't really teach that in school. So that brings me to something called, what I call, the 2 pillars of mental health. Very important for mental health to have both of these things in balance, and this is what I focus on when I work with people to help them with anxiety. So, and just as a caveat too, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I haven't been trained in counseling. Yet a lot of what I do in my clinic, which doesn't necessarily have to do with counseling, creates profound effects in people's moods. And that's what we're going to get into. So I'm going to talk about these 2 pillars of mental health. And the first pillar is the mental, emotional, spiritual pillar, right? How we actually perceive the world, and this depends on a whole bunch of factors: our education, the way we were brought up, where we were brought up, the skills we've learned being brought up, whether we have siblings or we don't have siblings, our social interactions as we were growing up, the different lessons that we learned, the teachers that we might have had through the years of our youth, and how much personal development you've done, what types of books do you read, so all of this has a lot to do with our perception of the world, right? And I like to call this the indoor of that pillar of the house. So we're going to think about the indoor and the outdoor, right? So our perceptions of the world and how we perceive and process the world, our mental, emotional, spiritual processing, is one pillar of that, of mental health. And the other pillar is biochemical, right? It's a biochemical pillar. So various chemicals, nutrients, drugs, foods, can actually influence the way we feel. I know, it's astounding, isn't it? But the way we feel can be changed drastically by many of these factors. And I'll give you some examples. If I'm iron deficient, right? If I have anemia, iron deficiency anemia, I can't make enough blood cells, and I can't bring oxygen around my body as efficiently. And one of the symptoms that a lot of people feel when they're anemic is fatigue. And how motivated do you feel when you're fatigued, right? And when you're fatigued, you're also more sensitive to various stimuli. Okay, so that would be one example of biochemical. Now, a couple other examples of biochemical, which are some of the lesser known causes of anxiety, I'm going to talk about 2 lesser known causes of anxiety. Our first, hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia, which is a situation where your blood sugar drops. And when your blood sugar drops, you have a lot of the symptoms that are similar to anxiety, like headaches, sugar cravings, irritability. Sometimes people even black out if it's really bad. You have a short fuse, right? People usually say things like, "You're on my last nerve." So with hypoglycemia, we can actually create a chemical situation in the body, low blood sugar, where we don't have enough to actually feed our nervous system. And that's why we don't want to be on that blood sugar roller coaster. Okay? So that's a biochemical influence that actually affects our mental health. And the two can interact as well. So when my blood sugar crashes, it affects my mental, emotional, spiritual perceptions. And when my mental, emotional, spiritual perceptions are altered, that can actually affect my biochemistry. And there's a researcher by the name of Candace Pert, and she talks about what she calls the molecules of emotion. And whenever we have an emotion, a perception of the world, we're processing something, we create this cocktail of molecules known as the molecules of emotion, and those are chemicals that go through our body and affect all of our cells in the body. We have receptors for these chemicals all over the body. And in fact, 2 of the key neurotransmitters that we're talking about when we're talking about anxiety is serotonin and norepinephrine. I'm going to elaborate now on the second lesser known cause of anxiety, and that is inflammation. Yeah, inflammation. So there's quite a bit of research coming out now that when the body is in an inflammatory state, that people are more prone to anxiety. Isn't that interesting? I actually had a client once who had some issues with anxiety, and it would affect her sleep. She'd have trouble falling asleep. And she noticed that, sometimes she had like joint pain and she would take a Tylenol or an Advil or something, and that would actually bring down her anxiety and she'd be able to sleep better. So that was a very interesting connection, because right away I saw that she was actually decreasing her anxiety with an anti-inflammatory. So why does that happen? What's the mechanism behind that? Well, we have an amino acid that lives in our nervous system called tryptophan. And tryptophan comes from food, right? Any food with protein, a complete protein is going to have that amino acid, tryptophan. Some have more than others. Like turkey has a lot of tryptophan. I think there was a Seinfeld episode way back in the day where they were giving, turkey to someone to try to get them to fall asleep. But why does that work? Well, actually it doesn't work, if you really want to know. But why do they think it works? Well, tryptophan is a precursor, meaning that it changes in the brain into something called serotonin. And serotonin is the happy chemical, and it's often implicated in anxiety as possibly being deficient. And then to take that even further, serotonin turns into melatonin, and melatonin helps us sleep. So important to prevent anxiety as well. Now, what happens when there's inflammation in the body is that instead of tryptophan going down the serotonin and the melatonin pathway, it gets changed into something called quinolinic acid. So instead of tryptophan, those critical resources needed to make this wonderful happy chemical called serotonin, instead of them being used for that, this resource goes and is converted to something called quinolinic acid, which is an anxiety-provoking chemical. It then goes and activates something called the NMDA receptor. So what we found is that when you use anti-inflammatories, or you use herbs that are anti-inflammatories, like turmeric is the powerful herb, it helps to bring down the inflammation in the body and restore the proper pathway of tryptophan to serotonin. So this is a perfect example of a biochemical pathway that affects the way we feel. Isn't that interesting? Now, the typical treatment for anxiety, if someone's experiencing anxiety and they go to the doctor and they say, I'm really anxious, typically the treatment is an antidepressant or a tranquilizer. right? A benzodiazepine, which are drugs that help to activate a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It actually helps to calm the mind. And we're going to talk about, when I get to my toolkit, something that actually mimics GABA and can be used to help calm the mind. A very natural substance that has no side effects, unlike a lot of the drugs that are used. So we talked about the 2 pillars of health: mental, emotional, spiritual, biochemical. On the biochemical side, we looked at a couple examples: hypoglycemia, so these blood sugar fluctuations, and inflammation. So when I work with a lot of people with anxiety, they see tremendous relief from balancing their blood sugar and from bringing down inflammation. Getting on an anti-inflammatory diet and maybe using some nutraceuticals or some herbs that help to bring down inflammation. Now, on the mental, emotional, spiritual side of things, I talked about the indoor and the outdoor. So the indoor is what we perceive. You know, things that we perceive as threatening those are the things that enter into our nervous system. If I don't perceive something as threatening, I'm not going to really bring it into my nervous system too much. So for example, I've got a whiteout roller sitting on my desk right now. It says whiteout on it. They've trademarked the name Easy Correct. It's a wonderful name. Remember the liquid whiteout? You'd open it up, it'd be all over the brush. You'd try to get like the right consistency. You'd like put it on the page, it'd be too thick. You'd be smelling the fumes, like it just wasn't a good situation. Then you'd have to let it dry. You'd forget it was still drying. You'd touch it, it'd get all over your hand. It just wasn't great. So I love these things, but this is not a commercial for dry whiteout. What this is, you know, it's just sitting on my desk. It's not threatening to me. It's just a whiteout. I perceive it as something that's helpful to me. I don't perceive it as something that's threatening to me. And we coexist, and that's my perception. I don't let it really come in the indoor. Okay? But say I was, you know, biking home one day. That's how I like to commute to and from work when I can. But say I was biking home, and all of a sudden, a truck was driving by me, and it was a delivery truck for the whiteout Easy Corrects. And the delivery truck maybe hit like a little patch of ice, and all of a sudden, all of the Easy Corrects came down, piled up on Josh. And they crushed me. And I got a broken arm and a broken leg, and, you know, I had to go to the hospital and get patched up and get some casts. And then I recover, and I come back to my clinic, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I look, and oh my God, I see my little Easy Correct sitting there. My little whiteout Easy Correct. I'm like, oh my God, that's the thing that broke my legs and my arms. And then I have a different perception of it. Now, of course, and then I can let it into my nervous system, and then it's in my nervous system, and it creates this cocktail of chemicals called the molecules of emotion. That's what I was talking about earlier. So my perception has changed, and therefore my nervous system is going to change. It's going to make me anxious and give me anxiety when I see that. So that is the indoor. Our perception is the indoor. Now, sometimes things get in there. You know, we can't live a perfectly anxiety-free life with just, you know, fun all the time and relaxation and hot baths and happy movies and sunny days. It just doesn't happen. So sometimes stuff gets into the indoor, and luckily we have an outdoor. And the outdoor is where we can do stress processing. I was talking about stress management one day with my wife, and she's like, no, it's not really stress management, because like you can't really manage the events. She's like, it's stress processing, because they come no matter what in that indoor, and then you have to process them so that you don't hold them in your body. And I love that. You know, thank you, Megan, for that wonderful tip. So I now call it stress processing, and it's about letting it go. It's about helping it leave the body, and there's so many different ways you could do that, and I'm sure all of you have really nice ways you can do that. Maybe you can throw that up in the chat box, and we can see how different people get rid of or help to process stress. I love a nice hot Epsom salt bath. I like a good sauna. I like to do some restorative yoga. I like to watch a happy show. Anyway, so those are some of those factors. And now I'd like to get into the toolkit. So you can walk away with a nice group of things that you can get started on, or maybe you're started on some of them that you can incorporate to help with anxiety, which is something, again, we all deal with. It's just sometimes we don't have the skills to properly work with it. No one helped us learn the skills. So I'm just going to check in online here to see what kind of comments have been coming through. We have a comment from Rena. Hold on, I just need to open. Just bear with me for a moment. We're just opening it up here. There we go. I just want to be able to see all your comments. So Arena's saying the stories we made up as littles create this lens we use / view perceive the world and us in it. Absolutely, and we all have a different history that really influences the way we perceive the world. That's so true, Rena. Marianne says, I'm on an antidepressant for my anxiety, but the side effects are so bad I cannot get off of it. I'm assuming the side effects of coming off of it. And that's where you need to really work with a trained professional, a healthcare practitioner, to help you get off of it, to figure out what the root causes are, to deal with those, address those, and then go through the process progressively with you. So it is possible, you just have to know which steps to take. And I've helped many people come off their antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications over the years. And I see a couple people have written movement, stretching. Jack wrote movement and stretching, and Shane has written creative music or art is really good, especially for those more creative people. Crystal has mentioned reading. Yeah, reading is also an amazing way to help unwind. So I'm going to jump into my toolkit here. And I've got a couple lifestyle ones, a couple dietary ones, and then one supplement that I think is really effective for people with anxiety. And I've used all of these with my clients, and I use them almost weekly with people because they're so effective. So the first one is deep breathing. Yeah, deep breathing. Who knew that it could be so effective? Now, I gotta say that deep breathing is probably the thing that you'll get your biggest bang for your buck. And if you think about breathing, so, with deep breathing, we can tap into the nervous system that we can't normally tap into. So with breathing, it can be voluntary. So, when I'm asleep at night, I'm unconscious and I'm breathing no problem, right? So my involuntary nervous system takes over. Or it can be voluntary, right? So I can control my breathing right now just by thinking about it, right? And that is, a gateway to really tap into our involuntary nervous system. So when I control my deep breathing, I can get in there, I can influence it, and I can actually help to clear cortisol just by taking a few deep breaths. So I often recommend to my clients to do 5 minutes of deep breathing as a start, right? If they've never really done any of this before. And it's all about breathing out longer than you breathe in. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, and you breathe out for 8 seconds. Super powerful. I suggest people take 5 minutes in their day to sit down, do it, no distractions. But you can also do it driving in the car. You can do it waiting at the bus stop. Lots of places you can do this, and you get a huge bang for your buck. Now, we also have to understand that when it comes to anxiety and retuning the nervous system, remolding it, causing neuroplasticity, it takes time. It takes training. We don't want to get discouraged. I can't even, if I had a penny for every time someone said to me I'm not a good meditator, I might have 300 pennies right now. $3. I might be able to make it home on the TTC here. I hear it all the time, and no one's a natural born meditator. It's a skill we need to learn. Just like we learn guitar 1 string at a time, 1 note at a time. We learn piano 1 note at a time, 1 chord at a time. We learn how to ride a bike progressively, that's our nervous system developing and growing. It's the same with stress processing. It's a skill we have to develop. So deep breathing and meditation is stuff you have to practice. Now, it's not sexy. It's not like you don't feel amazing after all the time, like you just did an amazing workout or you just saw a great movie, which is why a lot of people fall off. But you gotta stick with it because it can make a huge difference. So number one is deep breathing, 5 minutes a day, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. I like simple, and simple is effective. The second thing, and we talked about this earlier, is blood sugar control. Really limiting those carbohydrates that can burn up super fast and put you on that roller coaster. We want good fats, we want good proteins, especially in the morning. We want to be able to control our blood sugar throughout the day. Okay? That can make a huge difference on our mood. And I've had that one intervention cure people's anxiety just from changing up their diet. Getting out all the sugars. Okay? So if you are listening to this and you think you're sugar addicted, you love your sugar, I recommend that you try to eliminate it for 1 month straight as an experiment and see what happens. It's just 1 month out of your life, could make a profound difference. So those are a couple to begin with. And then the third one, super important here, is to avoid stimulants. Okay, so we got to take out the things that can actually induce anxiety in our body. Sugar was one of them I just mentioned. And there was actually a study published in the Annals of Internal Medicine in 1993, so this goes quite a far back, entitled The Effects of Caffeine on the Recognition of a Response to Hypoglycemia in Humans. And they were looking at coffee and found that it can actually induce anxiety in certain people. Caffeine. Coffee. So we want to take out the stimulants because that creates a fight or flight response in the body. Where do you think energy comes from when you're tired? You know, like you're drained, and then you have a coffee and you get your energy again. How do you think it's doing that? Well, it's activating and releasing certain stress hormones to put you in a fight or flight mode. It's a tricky little system that we have, and of course, coffee is the most used drug in the world. Okay. Avoidance of stimulants. Another one, exercise. Movement. You know, some people get freaked out by the word exercise, so we can use the word movement, okay? Because vigorously vacuuming isn't necessarily exercise, but it's movement, and it's quite good for you, actually. And you get to clean something in the process. So, exercise is one of the best antidepressants on the planet. It releases endorphins. It releases a whole bunch of chemicals that make us feel so good. It increases insulin sensitivity. It increases blood flow to the brain. It gets the creative juices flowing. So we want to make sure we move every day. I have a family member that's actually, he's been a psychiatrist for many, many years. He's actually more on like the conventional medicine side of psychiatry, but we were chatting one day, and he says that one of the best things for his patients that make the biggest impact is exercise. And that he helps about 85% of his patients with depression just by getting them to move and do exercise. So powerful, powerful stuff here. Okay, and just to cite a study here too, this was by Guskowska in 2004 in the journal Psychiatry, that there was a study just looking at 15 to 30 minutes 3 times a week for 10 weeks, and these people had profound decreases in their anxiety. So that's not even such a huge commitment. 15 to 30 minutes 3 times a week, and that's an amazing prescription for anxiety. Okay, so we talked about deep breathing. We spoke about blood sugar control, removing the stimulants, exercise, and the last one is a supplement. It's a supplement that's very effective at helping with relaxation. It's called L-Theanine. L-Theanine is actually derived from green tea. It's in green tea. green tea is a nice beverage if you're trying to come off caffeine, because you get the caffeine, a little caffeine, and you also get a little bit of L-Theanine in there, which helps to relax you. It kind of counteracts the caffeine. So L-Theanine is kind of like GABA. I was talking about GABA a little bit earlier, if you recall. And GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It helps to calm the brain. L-Theanine sort of mimics some of those effects. And it also increases what are called alpha waves in the brain. And alpha waves are associated with deep relaxation in an awake state. So L-Theanine can be very effective for helping those with anxiety throughout the day, and also helping people that have trouble falling asleep. They can use a little L-Theanine to kind of take the edge off. And the great thing about L-Theanine too is it's not really contraindicated with any drugs. Now I say that, and I just want to put a caveat on that, that if you are taking any drugs, you should always check with your healthcare provider to make sure that if you're taking any supplements, there's no interaction. But it's very safe. So those are the 5. We covered a lot here. We talked about the 2 pillars of health, why people get anxiety. We talked about a little toolkit that you have, deep breathing, taking out the stimulants, blood sugar control, making sure you exercise, and a supplement called L-Theanine. So I'm just going to jump onto some of the comments and questions here to see what has come through. Do we have any questions? If you have any questions, you can put them up. Question from Nida. My apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. She wrote, "Hi Josh, do you consider black tea as a stimulant?" Well, what I'm actually considering as a stimulant is the caffeine in coffee, the caffeine in green tea, the caffeine in black tea, right? So absolutely I would consider black tea a stimulant as well. I would consider sugar a stimulant. I see some unhappy faces coming down the line. Yes, I know. And I actually used to be a coffee drinker, believe it or not, over 10 years ago. I think that's how I got through university. And I just cut it out cold turkey, but it was a huge stimulant that helped me study and that helped me keep going because I wasn't living on good food, let me tell you. But black tea definitely is a stimulant. Now, if you are a coffee drinker, I like to, and you don't want to come cold turkey, you can use black tea, you can use green tea as sort of your ways to kind of come off of it slowly, because they have a fraction of what you would find in a coffee. Coffee has about 110 milligrams of caffeine. In a green tea, we're looking about 30 to 40 milligrams of green tea. So, 3 to 4 cups of green tea would be equivalent to a full cup of coffee, and you're getting a little bit of that L-Theanine, and you're getting a whole whack load of these amazing antioxidants that live in green tea called catechins. EGCG would be an example of one of those catechins, and they are potent antioxidants that help with detoxification in the liver. So, those are some side benefits of that beverage, but, those are good ways to wean off. But yes, anything with caffeine is going to be a stimulant. Sugar is a stimulant. A chocolate bar, where it has the chocolate with caffeine and the sugar, is people use that as stimulants as well. So we want to get off all those, or wean ourselves off of those, depending on who you are, because we all have different ways of doing things. Thanks for your question. Another question comes from Charity. Can L-Theanine be used for children who suffer from anxiety? I don't see why there would be any contraindications with using L-Theanine in children. What we would have to do is just adjust the dose for that child. Usually I do it based on body weight. So if you look at an adult dose and you sort of divide that dose by the same amount of pounds as your child. So say your child is half your weight, you use half the dosage, and that's usually effective. So yeah, you can definitely try it with children. I wouldn't hesitate to try it at all. There's also really nice herbs that you can use with children who might be experiencing anxiety, like lemon balm and catnip. Yeah, it might be a bit surprising to you. Catnip that makes cats go wild can actually help to calm humans. And you can usually find what are called glycerites, where they've taken the herb and preserved it in glycerin, which tastes really sweet and delicious, so it's really easy to use with children, and that's a good approach or thing to try with children as well who might be suffering from anxiety, might be a bit anxious. And you can even use these things like if they've injured themselves or if they're agitated for whatever reason. I wouldn't say it's drugging your kids, but it's using natural substances to try to help change the biochemistry a little bit, that one pillar. Okay, you're most welcome, Nada. And I don't see any more questions coming in. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to, just as I'm signing off here, thank you so much for joining me for This Week in the Clinic. Every week we have an episode where I share with you the lessons that I've learned in my clinic, working with humans, right? Working with real people, trying real interventions, and bringing the lessons that I learned to you so that you can live a better, happier, healthy life. And every week I'm kind of like listening and working to see, what the next subject will be. If you want to be up to date on all of the episodes, you can join my newsletter. Just go to joshgitalis.com. There's a few different places where you can sign up right on my page. And I give you links to replays, and I give you an introduction to the new topic and when we're going to be covering it in the following or that week in my newsletter. So sign up for that. You can find out all information about me at joshgitalis.com. We've got a killer course coming up on mental health and neurology. That starts in February. And we talk about anxiety, we talk about depression, we talk about ADHD and ADD, we talk about insomnia, we cover neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, dementia. We cover the works. It's a powerful course, and it's much needed. As I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, mental health is such a taboo topic. We have to break that open. Many of you may not know that depression is actually the leading cause of disability worldwide. Is that not astounding? I mean, the first time I heard that statistic, I was just blown away. It's the leading cause of disability. That's a lot of depression happening in our world. And as I mentioned with anxiety, we're in a system that's set up for us to fail. We're dealt a hand of cards that is very difficult to work with. It's like, oh, you've got a 2 and a 7 and a jack and a 10. Okay, like win the poker game. It's going to be very difficult, right? So we need strategies. I've provided you with a killer toolkit that you can use right away. 5 things that you can do on a regular basis or that you can even try if you're experiencing anxiety. And that's what it's all about. Making small changes progressively lead to huge changes in your health over the long run. So again, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Looking forward to next week in the clinic, where we talk about this week in the clinic, and we'll be here back on Fridays next week. Have a fantastic evening, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Bye.